After receiving his bachelor's degree in business administration from Babson College, Bourdon went on to earn his master's of education from UCLA and his doctorate in organizational leadership from Northeastern University. Welcome, Dr. Bourdon.
Great, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here with you all today. Before I move into an educational and interactive part of today's presentation, I'm going to start our time together by telling you a bit about myself and what drives me to do the work that I do. So I began my coming out of the closet process in 1998 at the age of 22. I had grown up in an extremely religious household, church every Sunday, vacation Bible school in the summer, being an elite member of our local Bible quizzing team. So religion, and it was really evangelical and conservative religion, was my foundation, and I loved it. With that came teaching that I took as fact. Coming directly from what I was taught was the Word of God, and that included the idea that homosexuality was an abomination, which was surely punishable by an eternity in hell. So interestingly, back in the 80s and early 90s, that topic didn't really come up very much at all. But when it did, I knew exactly where my church family and my immediate family stood on the matter. When I think back, I realize how much of those messages were very subtly having a really damaging effect on me. I played the game of the good Christian boy who had crushes on girls, dated girls, even hooked up with girls, but swore that I would keep my virginity until marriage. However, there was always this nagging that I really couldn't avoid. Part of it came from the outside. I was a caring boy, someone who could show compassion and emotion, someone who happened to like acting and dancing and eventually took up the sport of diving. So as you can imagine, that made me different from a lot of the other boys and made me a target for some really hurtful name-calling throughout some of my most formative years. But I would use my upbeat attitude, my winning personality, my wit, and my leadership skills to really just deflect, distract, and try to win people over, which, fortunately for me, helped keep the targeted bullying away. It also helped keep people's assumptions that I was gay to a minimum. However, there was another side of the nagging that I could never seem to completely shake. And that was that nagging feeling that came from within. It probably started around age 12 or so, mid-1980s, when I first got my hands on a copy of an issue of International Mail. Okay, so this was a men's mail order catalog that happened to have a very special section in the back called Undergear. Okay, so I just remember when I first got my hands on an issue of this magazine, my eyes and my heart nearly burst. I convinced myself that I merely just wanted to look like these ridiculously gorgeous ripped men in their undergear, and I subsequently talked my parents into letting me order this sit-up board that they sold for your abs for $29.99, and I didn't realize that if you ordered just one product through this, you would essentially end up on their catalog mailing list for life. So month after month, I would rush down to the mailbox to get my hands on the next issue and then sneak it up to my room before my parents even knew that the mail had arrived. And it excited me, but it also tormented me. And it began this process of me slightly realizing part of who I was at my core and doing everything I possibly could to push that away. I would obsess over this magazine, eventually throw it away, tell myself, no more international mail, only to be so excited when the next issue would come in the next month. I would be happy, then I would be extremely sad, because I had this terrible secret that I was keeping. I was attracted to men. On the outside, no one knew what was going on in terms of this internal struggle, but on the inside, I was distressed because I was possibly one of those people who was an abomination in the eyes of a God who I loved and I wanted to please so dearly. On the darkest of days, that pain in my heart and the pounding in my head would literally get so bad that I would bang my head on the floor or the wall when no one else knew that I was doing it, just to try to make it stop. So I kept it all to myself until about my senior year of college, when I just couldn't go on lying to myself anymore, by thinking that this was a passing phase or something that I could make go away. The college that I went to also happened to be pretty darn conservative, with absolutely no out LGBTQ people, but I finally started talking to someone. It was a counselor in a really safe and private environment, and I started to come out, both to myself and to him. By the end of that year, I knew that I had to get as far away as possible from my home state of Massachusetts, as well as my family and everyone that I knew. So a month after I graduated from college, it was 1998, I moved to Southern California to begin my career, and with this determination that I would take a break from dating girls for a while. So after being there for about 2 weeks, I went onto this website called gay.com that had these chat rooms where you could talk with other people in your local area. Now, this was back in the day of literally the blinking green cursor, none of the high-tech photo sharing or video chat or anything like that. And that first night that I went on, at the age of 22, I started talking to this guy. His name was James. He was 24. And I remember he was so nice and funny, and we chatted for a couple hours, and I decided to take a risk. I asked him if he wanted to go, at that moment, meet up for coffee to continue the conversation in person. So let me tell you, again, this was 1998, so this was considered very risky at the time. And I'm telling you, Oprah would be on television telling people, do not meet up with people who you speak to online. They're serial killers. They're serial killers. You know, she was like, don't do this. But I got to a point where I just didn't care anymore. I needed so desperately to be me and to meet other people like me. I needed that so desperately that if this guy, James, ended up killing me, so be it, because I was at that point where I was that desperate just to no longer feel bad about myself or to feel alone. Well, he didn't kill me. He actually won me over, or maybe I should say I won him over, probably like in the first hour or so. And I didn't want to rush things, so it's not like I told him I loved him that first night or anything. I waited 4 nights later until I did that. And that was Pride weekend, end of June, 1998. Finally being able to love myself and feel love for someone else that was actually being returned back to me. It set me on this course for being out, for being my authentic self, and being truly happy. So now, 19 years later, I still make it a habit of telling my husband, Jimmy, also known as James, how much I love him and feel so blessed to have him on a daily basis, as we also say to our 7-year-old son and our 5-year-old daughter. Having someone both know and love me for exactly who I am is exactly what I needed to officially begin my coming out process. I needed to feel safe. I needed to know that I had the support of others. There is so much judgment and hate out there, even today. So whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, queer, questioning, asexual, intersex, or quite frankly, if you're different in any way, be it sexuality or gender or race, religion, or any identity that we hold, it is hard and it is scary to be different. And we all need to know that others have our back. So after working for about 6 years, I was really starting to feel unfulfilled in the work that I was doing. I wanted to do something where I knew I was making a difference. I thought back to my struggles in school, particularly in college, and how much I needed more support. And how thankful I also was to have had some really kind college administrators who had unknowingly really helped me get through some challenging times. So I decided to take on a new job as a career counselor at UCLA, while simultaneously starting a Master's of Education program there. So the year was 2005, and I had been with Jimmy for just about 7 years, just over, and we had just had a really amazing wedding ceremony, and I was at the start of my new Master's program in a new career. I was taking the only multicultural course that the program offered. It was taught by this wonderful older woman of color who also happened to be partially deaf, who had done counseling for her entire career. So we were a few weeks into the course, and I was totally digging the class, the instructor, the curriculum. And on this one particular day, she asked the class something. And I don't even remember what the actual prompt was. I just remember that I offered my response, which began with something like, well, my husband and I, blah, blah, blah. So she had this really confused look on her face. She said, you're what? And I said, oh, my husband and I. She said, I'm sorry. You know I'm hard of hearing. I thought you just said my husband. Okay, so I was at a very different stage of life at this point. I was happy. I was confident in myself. I was proud of myself and of the amazing life and family that Jimmy and I were beginning to build for ourselves. So not even thinking twice, especially since I thought I was in a safe environment. And I actually assumed this person already knew who the true, authentic Tom was. I said, no, you heard me right. I said my husband. I'm gay. You're gay? Okay, so it was at that exact moment that I suddenly felt unsafe again. For the first time in quite a while. I said, yes, I'm gay and I'm married to a man, which is why I said my husband. You're gay. So the entire class was really in shock at her response. This was coming from someone who understood what it meant to be marginalized based on her race, her gender, her age, her hearing impairment, and not to mention the fact that she taught multiculturalism at one of the best colleges in our country. So this was not the reaction that I was expecting. I honestly couldn't even tell in this moment if she was kidding or if this was some simulated counseling type exercise. Was John Quinones about to walk in from What Would You Do, with the camera crew? Well, he never entered the room. The instructor told us that she needed a few minutes to process this because she had no idea. And she just needed some time before she could continue on with that week's lesson plan. So I'm no John Quinones, but I can assure you that that reaction is not what you should do. So I wasn't sure if she was reacting that way because she felt I had sneakily kept a secret from her. I didn't know if it was because I didn't hit enough of the stereotypes of what she thought it meant for someone to be gay. I was unsure if maybe this was in contradiction to her own moral beliefs, or maybe because she suddenly thought less of me. I know those are all really negative assumptions that I had going on through my mind, but these were really the only types of conclusions that I could come to at that moment based on the less than celebratory reaction she had when she realized that I was a member of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT community. So I honestly don't know what was going on with her or why she had the reaction that she had. But there was one thing that did become really clear to me in that moment. It doesn't matter the time, the place, or the environment. There's always going to be so much work that needs to be done in the world when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and being an ally to other people. I knew that I was on the right path in my career, for me, doing my part to create a safer and more inclusive world for people. And I don't think it makes a difference who we are. I know that I hold so much privilege as a white, able-bodied male who has really so much to be thankful for, in so many ways just based on the circumstances that life handed me alone. But we all, in my belief, have the opportunity to figure out how we can make the world a better and safer place. Whether we do it for our career or we just find simple, small opportunities each and every day to do so. So for over a dozen years now, I've been blessed enough to do diversity and inclusion-related work. And quite a bit of it specifically has been focused on the LGBTQ community. Even when I'm working with LGBT employee resource groups, which I get to do quite frequently, I always find there to be so much value in beginning the conversation at the foundational ground level, when we're talking about things like how to be an ally to the LGBT community, and how we can all make sure that we're creating safe spaces for LGBTQ people. So because of that reason, for today's presentation, I'm going to now take some time to go through what we're talking about when we say LGBTQ. Again, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning. When we're talking about things like biological sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And then we'll move into some of the realities that LGBTQ people still face today in 2017, and finally, ways that we can all be allies to support this community.